Captain Daniel Harper sat in his small cabin aboard the human diplomatic vessel, staring at the glowing envelope that had appeared in front of him without warning. The message pulsed with a soft violet light, shifting shapes as if alive. He had handled hundreds of diplomatic messages in his career, but nothing like this. The writing floated in the air, curling and folding in patterns his human eyes struggled to understand. Finally, he managed to read the words. "Your presence is requested at the royal nuptials of Princess of the Empire. Attendance is not optional." Daniel blinked. The name alone carried weight across human space. They were mysterious, multi-limbed beings whose culture humans barely understood. Their eyes looked like polished crystals, their scales shimmered in colors that reflected their emotions, and their rituals were said to be mesmerizing and dangerous. To be invited, or commanded, to their royal wedding was almost unheard of. He ran a hand over his tired face. "A wedding," he muttered. "What could they possibly want with me?" Yet a part of him, a small spark of curiosity, refused to let the thought go. He had always been drawn to the unknown, to worlds humans feared to tread. And this was the unknown in its form. When his ship arrived at Daniel's breath caught. The palace hovered above an iridescent lake, its towers reflecting the colors of twin moons. Bridges of light connected the floating spires, and water that glowed faintly beneath shimmered in waves of violet and green. Servants with limbs bending in impossible ways greeted him with a harmony of sounds that humans could barely comprehend. Every step he took felt like walking in a dream, or a painting that was alive. He was led into a grand hall that stretched higher than the tallest human skyscraper. Thousands were gathered, their bodies gleaming in ceremonial robes that glinted like liquid metal. Daniel tried to bow as humans did, but the motion seemed clumsy and small compared to the grace surrounding him. A soft hum of music filled the air, vibrating through his chest, as if the hall itself was breathing. Then he saw her, Princess. She moved across the floor with a quiet elegance, her scales catching the light in colors that shifted from soft blue to deep violet. Her eyes, oh, her eyes were pools of shifting light, reflecting the hall, the stars outside, and something else he couldn't name. When she smiled at him, Daniel felt warmth fill a place he didn't know was empty. In that instant, he knew she was unlike anyone he had ever seen. Approached him, her movements smooth, confident, yet gentle. "Captain Harper," she said, her voice like a song carried on a breeze. "Thank you for coming." Daniel swallowed. The sound of her voice made the palace seem quieter, more intimate, even though thousands surrounded them. He could only nod, words failing him. The ceremony began soon after. Daniel watched as the alien nobles arranged themselves in intricate patterns, their limbs weaving through the air like ribbons of living crystal. Chants rose and fell in harmonics that seemed impossible, notes resonating in a way that made his chest ache with emotion. He felt out of place, fragile, yet he could not look away. The display was beautiful, terrifying, and completely captivating. He noticed subtle glances from the groom, a towering figure with scales darker than night. There was tension in the air, something Daniel didn't yet understand. Whispers traveled across the hall, curious and cautious. Humans were seen as fragile, unpredictable, and dangerous. And here he was, standing in the center of the most important event in society, a single human among thousands of alien eyes. But as he looked back she met his gaze without hesitation. There was no fear there, only acknowledgement and something inviting. He realized, even as his heart raced, that he was not merely an observer. Somehow his presence mattered. Somehow he was part of this world now. And in that moment, Daniel knew this night would change everything, though he could not yet imagine how. The music swelled, the lights danced across the hall, and the wedding began in earnest. Daniel felt a strange mix of awe, fear, and anticipation. He was a human, fragile and alone in a palace that belonged to beings who had no need for him. And yet, as Princess smiled again, he understood something deep and undeniable. Even here, in a world so different from his own, humans had a place. The wedding ceremony had begun, and Captain Daniel Harper felt both amazed and nervous. The hall shimmered with colors he had never seen before. Light floated in the air, twisting like liquid ribbons, and the scent of alien flowers filled his senses. Each flower seemed to hum softly, as if acknowledging the presence of every guest. Daniel took a careful step forward, trying not to draw attention, but he could feel the eyes of hundreds on him. Princess moved gracefully among the guests, her eyes occasionally meeting Daniel. Every time she did, he felt a flutter of warmth in his chest. He wanted to say something, but his human voice felt small in this enormous hall filled with alien sounds. Finally, she approached him, her crystal-like eyes bright with curiosity. "Captain Harper," she said, "I am glad you accepted our invitation." Her tone carried no formality, only a quiet kindness that made Daniel's heart race. He nodded, struggling to find words that would match the elegance of her presence. The ceremony itself was unlike anything he had imagined. Nobles arranged themselves in precise formations, their limbs bending and moving in patterns that seemed to follow invisible music. The air was alive with harmonic tones, resonating deep in Daniel's chest. He could feel the vibrations in his bones, a strange, powerful rhythm that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. He was both terrified and entranced. Then the bridegroom appeared. His scales were a deep, stormy gray, and his eyes were sharp and calculating. When he saw Daniel, a subtle narrowing of his crystalline gaze betrayed suspicion, perhaps even irritation. Daniel noticed the way the around him whispered, glances darting between the human and the groom. He understood instinctively, saw him as a threat, though Daniel had done nothing to warrant it. The ceremony continued, but Daniel could not focus. His attention kept returning to who seemed to radiate light and calm in a way that softened the tension around her. She leaned slightly toward him and whispered, "You are different, Captain Harper. I am glad you are here." Daniel's lips parted, unsure how to respond. I am honored," he managed finally. The simplicity of his words felt clumsy in this alien setting, yet smiled, as if understanding the meaning behind them perfectly. As the ritual progressed, Daniel observed something curious. They placed a small, glowing crystal in his hands. Its light pulsed in harmony with her heartbeat, or at least it seemed that way to him. Then stepped forward, performing an intricate dance of gestures, each movement precise and commanding. Daniel felt the tension rising, like a storm building on the horizon. The energy between the bride and groom was formal and rigid, but every glance gave Daniel carried warmth that could not compete with. Suddenly the music changed. A deeper, more intense frequency filled the hall, vibrating through Daniel's chest. Eyes snapped toward him, sharp and cold. Daniel understood immediately. The ceremony had shifted. This was no longer merely a wedding, it was a test, a measure of worth, a subtle challenge to his presence. Whispers rose among the nobles. The human was here, fragile, yet bold enough to attend such a sacred event. Despite his fear, Daniel felt a surge of determination. He reminded himself that humans had survived impossible situations before, and that courage often spoke louder than skill or strength. He straightened his back, taking in a deep breath. Eyes found his again, steady and unafraid. In that moment, he knew he was not alone. Her silent support gave him a quiet strength, a sense that he belonged here, even among beings whose customs were so alien. The final ritual began, and Daniel realized that his presence mattered more than he had ever expected. The ceremony was no longer just about two uniting. His humanity, unpredictable and different, had shifted the mood of the court. Nobles who had whispered about fragility now watched him with curiosity, respect, or perhaps even admiration. And as his hand brushed briefly against his, a tiny spark of warmth surged through him, something deeper than fascination or fear. It was connection. By the end of the ceremony, Daniel felt both exhausted and exhilarated. The music quieted, the lights softened, and for a moment he stood in a world that was dazzling, terrifying, and beautiful all at once. Princess smiled at him one last time, a look full of meaning that words could never capture. He had come as a guest, an observer, a diplomat. But as they continued their celebrations, Daniel realized that this night might change the course of his life forever. He could not know yet what that change would be, but one thing was clear. In a world so strange and vast, humans had a place, and perhaps with courage and heart they could leave a mark even among the stars. The celebration continued, music and lights swirling around the floating palace, but Daniel could not relax. He felt a sharp gaze on him, like ice cutting through his skin. The bridegroom had not left his side since the final ritual. His crystalline eyes followed Daniel's every move, a silent accusation heavier than words. Finally approached, his towering form casting a long shadow across the glowing floor. He stopped only a few paces away, folding his many arms in a stance Daniel instinctively recognized. This was a challenge. The court held its collective breath. Daniel's heart pounded, but he forced himself to remain calm. Humans were seen as fragile in the galaxy, but he refused to let fear dictate his actions. "You are far from your world, human," said, his voice low and resonant. "And yet you walk among us with no fear, but presence alone does not earn respect. You must prove your worth." He gestured sharply, and the nobles formed a ring around them. The air shimmered with anticipation, and Daniel felt every eye on him. He swallowed hard. "What do I have to do?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. His lips curved into a cold smile. "A test of skill, of courage, of instinct. Survive and you will be acknowledged. Fail and, well, the court will decide your fate." Daniel's mind raced. He was trained in diplomacy, negotiation, and survival under extreme conditions, but this was no negotiation. It was raw challenge. He glanced at whose eyes met his. There was no fear there, only trust and encouragement. A strange warmth surged through him. He was not just a human standing alone, someone believed in him. The duel began. Moved first, striking with precision and strength that would have killed a human instantly. Daniel dodged instinctively, relying not on power, but on agility and quick thinking. He used the unfamiliar terrain of the palace to his advantage, weaving around floating platforms and glowing columns. Every movement he made was unorthodox, human in its unpredictability, and it drew a mixture of gasps and murmurs from the watching nobles. Adjusted, attempting to anticipate Daniel's moves, but human unpredictability was his greatest strength. Daniel ducked under a sweeping strike, grabbed a shimmering rope of light and used it to pivot out of harm's way. The court was silent, mesmerized. They had expected fragility, weakness, but what they saw was creativity, courage, and a raw form of power entirely new to them. The duel lasted only minutes, but to Daniel it felt like hours. Sweat ran down his face, muscles burned, but adrenaline and focus kept him moving. Then, in a final move, Daniel leapt high and landed perfectly behind, using the momentum of the palace floor's shifting energy to throw the groom off balance. Stumbled, not injured but humiliated. A shocked silence swept through the crowd, broken only by a few cautious murmurs of admiration. His eyes shone brighter than the floating lights around them. She stepped forward, clapping gently, a gesture of both relief and joy. "You are remarkable, Captain Harper," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Daniel's chest swelled, not with pride, but with a sense of belonging he had never known. Straightened, dignity intact, but ego bruised. He inclined his head toward Daniel, acknowledging the human's unexpected strength. "You are not what I expected," he admitted, voice tight but respectful. The court erupted into murmurs of approval, impressed that a human had not only survived but triumphed in a challenge meant to test alien warriors. Daniel exhaled, lowering his guard for the first time since the duel began. He felt presence beside him, steady and warm. It was strange. He had come as a guest, a stranger in a world that was not his own. But in that moment he felt a connection deeper than he could describe. Courage, skill, unpredictability, and heart. Perhaps those were qualities that mattered most, even in a civilization far older and wiser than his own. As the court slowly returned to celebration, Daniel realized the night had changed. He was no longer merely an observer at a wedding. He had made his mark. The princess's trust, the noble's recognition, and even's reluctant respect were proof that humans could survive and thrive among the stars. And as he looked at, he understood something that went beyond honor or courage. Perhaps this night had set the course of his life in a way he would never forget. After the duel, the palace buzzed with quiet excitement. Guests whispered about the human who had bested the powerful noble without even harming him. Daniel walked slowly through the grand hall, trying to absorb the surreal beauty around him. The shimmering floors, the floating lights, and the soft hum of alien music that seemed to resonate with his very bones. Yet no detail could distract him from one thought. He found her on a terrace overlooking the iridescent lake, where the twin moons reflected like molten silver. She was seated on a smooth stone bench, her posture relaxed but elegant, and her eyes were fixed on the water. When she saw Daniel approach, her face brightened with a smile that made his chest tighten. "You surprised everyone," she said softly, as if speaking to no one but him. I didn't mean to," Daniel replied, scratching the back of his neck. His voice sounded clumsy even to his own ears, but he didn't care. "I just reacted. Humans do that sometimes." Laughed, a sound that was gentle, melodic, and unlike anything he had ever heard. It made the tension of the last hour slip from his shoulders. "I like it," she said, turning to face him fully. "You don't follow the rules that bind everyone else. You move differently, think differently. It's refreshing." Daniel swallowed. Her words warmed him more than the glowing moonlight ever could. For the first time in this alien world, he felt understood. They began walking slowly along the terrace, talking about their lives. Daniel told her stories of Earth, the chaotic streets, the storm, the food that burned his tongue but thrilled his senses, the strange, endless blue sky that never failed to amaze him. Listened intently, her eyes reflecting the moons and the water below. Then she shared tales of life, the rigid traditions, the ceremonies that lasted for hours, and the hidden joys she found in small moments of rebellion against expectation. Daniel laughed at her stories, imagining the princess sneaking through palace corridors, hiding from her advisors, exploring secret gardens. Laughed at his descriptions of Earth's simple absurdities, humans slipping on icy streets, dancing in rain, or celebrating holidays with loud noise and strange rituals. Each laugh, each shared story made the space between them smaller, softer, warmer. Hours passed, though neither noticed. Daniel realized that in the vastness of the palace, among thousands of alien eyes, he had found a rare intimacy. This connection, so human, so simple, so impossible in such a rigid world, was something neither of them could ignore. And Daniel understood something important. Courage had opened a door, but trust and understanding had built a bridge. Stopped and turned to him. "You know," she whispered, "the elders of my court are already talking about the outcome of the duel. By our tradition, the one who proves strength and honor may be claimed as a champion by the princess. That could be you." Her words hung in the air, surreal and weighty. Daniel's stomach tightened. Marriage to an alien princess was never part of his plan. He was a guest, a diplomat, a human who had survived a challenge by instinct and courage. Yet as he looked into his eyes, warm, hopeful, and full of trust, he felt something unfamiliar, a deep, steady certainty that he wanted to be there for her, whatever that might mean. He began, but words faltered. He realized that no human phrases could capture what he felt: admiration, respect, a growing fondness, and something more profound, almost sacred. Smiled at him again, understanding everything without a single spoken word. She reached out and their hands touched briefly, the contact gentle but electric. The world felt still. The palace noises faded, the floating lights seemed to dim, and all that remained was a human and an alien princess, standing together on a terrace that bridged two worlds. Daniel understood that night, in that quiet moment, that this bond was different from duty or expectation. It was choice, trust, and heart intertwined. For the first time, he saw that humans had more to offer the stars than survival alone. Courage, unpredictability, and genuine connection, qualities small and simple, yet powerful, could shine even in the most alien of worlds. And in his gaze he felt a promise, silent but real, that this night, this meeting, might be the beginning of something extraordinary. The next morning the palace felt quieter, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Captain Daniel Harper had spent the night wandering the gardens, trying to make sense of the strange whirlwind of events. The duel, the whispered admiration of the nobles' gaze, it was overwhelming, and yet a strange calm had settled over him. Humans often faced impossible situations, but never like this. In the heart of an alien empire, he had become more than a guest. A summons arrived, delivered by a servant with limbs that twisted and bent in ways Daniel had not thought possible. The message was simple. The king requested his presence in the throne hall. Daniel's stomach tightened. He had survived the challenge, won the respect of the court, and shared moments of quiet understanding with. But now he would face the ruler himself, the being whose word could decide the future of a human in this world. The throne hall was vast, a cathedral of light and color. Daniel stepped in carefully, bowing in a gesture he hoped was respectful enough without appearing fearful. The king's presence was overwhelming. His scales shimmered in deep sapphire and his eyes glowed like twin crystals, assessing every detail of the human before him. Daniel felt tiny, fragile, a mortal standing in the presence of a god. "Captain Harper," the king's voice rumbled, echoing through the hall. "You have attended our daughter's wedding, faced our court, and survived the trial of—" Daniel nodded, his throat tight. "I did my best, Your Majesty." The king's gaze softened slightly, and he gestured for Daniel to rise fully. "Your best," the king said, "has altered more than the outcome of a single ceremony. By our ancient law, a princess may claim as her champion the being who demonstrates courage, honor, and ingenuity. This choice is hers alone, but your actions have made the path clear." Daniel's heart skipped. He had anticipated admiration, perhaps gratitude, but a claim by a princess. Marriage to an alien royal. His mind spun with possibilities he had never considered. Stepped forward, her presence steady and calm, a contrast to the whirlwind in Daniel's mind. Her eyes found his, and he saw the same mixture of hope and trust he had seen on the terrace the night before. The court watched in silence, waiting. Even, dignified but bruised in pride, observed quietly, no longer challenging but curious. The king inclined his head toward the princess. He said, voice deep and resonant, "The choice is yours." Daniel could feel the tension in the air like static electricity. Everything seemed to slow. Every breath, every heartbeat, every glance mattered. Took a step closer to Daniel, her voice soft but clear. I choose him," she said, and her words carried more power than any command. Daniel's chest tightened. He had never expected this. It was impossible, unimaginable, yet completely real. A human, standing before an alien court, had been chosen by a princess as her champion. The nobles whispered in astonishment. Some gasped, others leaned forward, curious. Daniel's mind raced. This was beyond honor, beyond duty. It was a bond, fragile but undeniable, recognized by one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. He swallowed hard and bowed deeply to and her father. "I am honored," he said quietly. "I will serve and stand by her in any way I can." The king's eyes glimmered with approval, and the tension in the room softened. Even nodded slightly, conceding respect where it was due. Daniel realized that this was more than recognition. It was acceptance. He, a single human, had found a place not just among aliens but at the very heart of their empire. Reached for his hand, her touch gentle and grounding. Daniel felt a warmth that went beyond words, a connection that neither time nor distance could break. In that moment, he understood that courage, empathy, and sincerity could bridge worlds in ways that power and tradition alone never could. As the court slowly resumed their celebration, Daniel stood beside, aware that the life he had known on Earth was behind him. Ahead lay a world strange and magnificent, filled with unknown challenges, but also possibilities beyond imagination. A human had not only survived the alien court, he had become part of it, and in doing so, had rewritten the rules of what was possible. For the first time, Daniel felt truly at home, standing beside a princess, in a palace suspended above a glowing lake, under twin moons that promised a future no human had ever dreamed. The palace was quiet in the early hours of the morning, the floating lights dimmed to a soft glow. Daniel Harper walked beside Princess through the garden terraces, their footsteps echoing softly on the polished stone. The air smelled of alien blossoms, faintly sweet and strangely familiar. Despite the grandeur and rigid traditions surrounding them, a sense of calm settled over the pair, a rare moment where duty and expectation faded into something simpler, something human. Stopped at a fountain where water glowed faintly in blue and green. She leaned on the edge, watching the reflections ripple across the surface. "Captain Harper," she said softly, "tonight you didn't just survive a challenge. You changed how my people see you, how we see humans." Daniel blinked, surprised. He had never considered that a single action, however brave, could shift centuries of belief. I just did what I had to," he said. "Humans survive by trying, by thinking, by feeling." "Maybe that's all you saw." Laughed lightly, a sound like wind over crystal. "No," she said firmly. "I saw you, not just a human but someone who acts with heart. You are different. You make me believe in possibilities I never dared imagine." Daniel felt warmth flood his chest. He had faced countless dangers in his life, space storms, hostile worlds, even assassination attempts, but nothing had ever made him feel as alive as her words did. They walked together along the terrace, sharing stories of their worlds. Daniel spoke of simple human pleasures, walking barefoot in rain, tasting strange foods that burned yet delighted, and moments of quiet laughter with friends. Shared secret corners of the palace, places humans would never know existed, hidden gardens, quiet observation decks, and corridors where the hum of the palace machinery sounded almost like music. Each story drew them closer, bridging a gap between species with something simple and profound: connection. At one point, pulled Daniel toward a small amphitheater overlooking the lake. "Let's do something human," she said mischievously. "Show me one of your dances." Daniel laughed nervously. He had never been graceful, never a dancer, but he stepped forward, awkwardly moving his arms and feet in ways humans called dancing. Clapped and laughed, her scales flickering in shades of joy. Then she tried, moving in the alien grace unique to her people. Daniel her motions, failing and tripping slightly, but they both laughed until the stars overhead blurred. The simple human laughter shared in this alien setting was a revelation. For the first time, Daniel felt that humanity could exist here, not as fragile observers but as participants in something extraordinary. He realized that courage, honor, and survival were not the only things that mattered. Joy, connection, and the ability to share moments, no matter how small, could leave as much impact as strength or skill. Rested her hand on his arm, her touch gentle and grounding. "Captain Harper," she said, her voice quiet, "I think this us is more than what I expected, more than rules or customs. It feels real." Daniel nodded, feeling the truth of her words resonate in his chest. He had faced battles, duels, and diplomacy, but nothing had prepared him for the simplicity of this moment, standing beside someone who believed in him just for who he was. As twin moons reflected across the iridescent lake below, Daniel and sat in silence, sharing warmth and presence rather than words. In that quiet, Daniel realized something he had not yet allowed himself to hope: that humans, fragile and unpredictable as they were, could belong here. Not as servants, not as observers, but as equals, capable of love, courage, and inspiration. The palace slowly came alive again, servants moving quietly, lights brightening, and music returning. But Daniel and remained in their own world, laughing softly, sharing glances, and learning each other in ways that no formal ceremony could teach. It was a new beginning, a merging of two very different lives, and Daniel understood that he had not only survived the alien court, he had found a place to truly live, to truly belong. And in that moment, with alien stars above and human heart within, Daniel Harper realized something incredible. Sometimes, the bravest thing a human could do was to open themselves to connection, to warmth, and to love in the most impossible of worlds. The palace was alive with music and light, brighter than any human festival Daniel Harper had ever seen. Today was not just a celebration, it was a union that had changed the course of two worlds. Humans and alike gathered, curiosity and awe blending in every gaze. Daniel walked beside Princess, his hand in hers, feeling a calm certainty that had been absent the first time he set foot in this alien empire. His eyes shone, reflecting every floating light in the hall. She leaned toward him, whispering, "I never imagined it could be like this with a human." Daniel smiled softly. "Neither did I," he said, "but it feels right. It feels like home." Her smile widened, warm and confident, and Daniel felt something shift inside him, a sense that he was no longer just a guest in this alien world. He was a part of it, a bridge between two civilizations that had never fully understood each other. The ceremony began, blending both human and traditions. Crystals hovered in the air, pulsing with light, while Daniel and repeated simple vows that felt like threads tying their hearts together. The elders whispered among themselves, but even their skepticism was softened by the undeniable connection between the human and the princess. When Daniel placed his hand over, there was a wave of energy, subtle yet real, that resonated through the crowd. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but in that unpredictability was courage, compassion, and strength that even the oldest traditions could not ignore. The groom from the earlier duel approached, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Daniel tensed, expecting confrontation, but bowed his head, a gesture of respect that spoke volumes. "You have earned your place," he said simply, and Daniel felt a quiet relief. Even the most skeptical alien warrior had recognized something humans had always known: heart and courage could match any power in the galaxy. As the ceremony continued, Daniel caught glimpses of children playing in the palace gardens, half human, half, their laughter blending the sounds of two worlds. The thought brought a smile to his face. He realized that this union was not only about him, and it was about a future where humans and could coexist, learning from each other, sharing their strengths, and building something new together. After the formalities, the court erupted into celebration. Music, lights, and laughter filled every corner of the palace. Daniel moved among the guests, sharing smiles, laughter, and small moments of intimacy that no protocol could dictate. He tasted alien delicacies, some spicy, some sweet, and tried to teach how humans clapped and cheered. She laughed, spinning in a way that made her scales shimmer in colors Daniel had never seen. It was a joy beyond ceremony, a moment of pure human connection that even the oldest had never experienced. Later, they walked back to the terrace overlooking the glowing lake. The twin moons reflected in the water, casting silver paths that seemed to lead into eternity. Rested her head on Daniel's shoulder, her hand clasped in his. "I never thought a human could feel like this, like we belong together," she whispered. Daniel kissed the top of her head, his heart full. "I never imagined it either," he admitted. "But here we are, and I wouldn't change a thing." Daniel realized in that quiet moment that humans had done more than survive in the stars. They had shown that courage, warmth, and love could shine even in the most alien worlds. Their marriage was more than a union of two beings. It was a statement, a bridge between civilizations, proof that humanity could inspire, transform, and endure. As the palace lights shimmered and the celebration continued far below, Daniel Harper looked at, and then at the stars above. He had come as a guest, a stranger, unsure of his place among the. Now he stood as a partner, a champion, and a symbol of what humanity could achieve, not through conquest but through heart, courage, and connection. The night stretched on, peaceful and full of possibility. And as they watched the twin moons reflect in the iridescent waters, Daniel knew that the universe had room for humans, not as weak outsiders, but as equals capable of love, bravery, and wonder. A new chapter had begun, one that promised adventures, challenges, and triumphs beyond imagination. And he would face them, hand in hand with, in a world where humanity had finally found its place among the stars.